incoming!
Now I'm going to tell you about the strangest weapon of World War II that you've never heard of. It will definitely change your perception of war, so be prepared to be surprised. World War II was an era of giant factories, armies numbering in the thousands, and legendary technology such as T-34 tanks and Spitfire aircraft. But behind the scenes of this grand theater of war, another hidden war was unfolding. It was a war of lone engineers, soldier ingenuity, and desperate inventions born in the mud of the trenches and secret laboratories. In these inhuman conditions, everyday objects were turned into weapons, and the craziest ideas were given a chance to be realized. This is not a story about famous generals, but about nameless geniuses and their strange creations.
Any deviation past this point.
These inventions were supposed to change the course of the war, but most of them remained only footnotes in the pages of history. Watch the video to the end to find out how bats were supposed to burn Japan and why the British tried to build an aircraft carrier out of ice. What I am about to show you looks more like a circus prop than a weapon. In anticipation of the Normandy landings, British engineers faced a serious problem: the German Atlantic Wall. Breaking through this powerful defensive line required something completely new and unpredictable. Thus, the idea of the Great Panjandrum was born, a giant self-propelled explosive device. The design was absurdly simple and insane at the same time. It consisted of two huge steel wheels connected by a central drum filled with a ton of explosives. This monster was set in motion by dozens of powder rockets attached to the wheels. The engineers assumed that the Panjandrum, accelerating to a speed of about 100 kilometers per hour, would be able to break through any defense. It was supposed to roar across the beach and explode at the concrete wall, creating a passage for the infantry. The tests of this marvel of engineering turned into a real farce. During the very first launch, most of the rockets failed to fire, and the wheel rolled sluggishly for a few meters. In subsequent tests, the rockets fell off while in motion and flew across the beach with a hiss, scattering frightened observers. The Panjandrum proved completely uncontrollable. It wobbled, fell on its side, and moved in an unpredictable trajectory. During one of the final tests, it turned around and rushed towards the cameraman, who had to flee. The project was deemed a complete failure and quietly shut down. The weapon that was supposed to terrify the enemy ended up scaring only its own creators. The idea turned out to be too ambitious and impractical for real combat conditions. The Panjandrum never saw combat. It went down in history as one of the most bizarre and dangerous military experiments. It is a striking example of how a desperate need for new weapons can give rise to real monsters. Today, footage of its tests provokes laughter, but it serves as a reminder of the enormous cost and risks involved in the search for unconventional solutions. It is a monument to engineering audacity bordering on madness. We are very interested in hearing your opinion. Do you think such weapons would have had a chance of success under different circumstances? Write about it in the comments. Want to know a secret that has been kept by the secret services for decades? In the world of espionage and sabotage, silence has always been the main weapon. Any loud noise could ruin the entire operation and cost the agent their life. It was for such tasks that the British Special Operations Executive created one of the quietest pistols in history, the well rod. At first glance, the well rod looks more like a piece of plumbing pipe or a bicycle pump than a weapon. It had nothing superfluous: a simple tube, a handle that also served as a magazine, and a basic slide. The absence of complex parts made it incredibly reliable. The main secret of the pistol was hidden inside its integrated silencer. It consisted of several rubber partitions and a metal mesh that effectively slowed down and cooled the powder gases. The sound of the shot was no louder than the slam of a car door. However, such silence came at a price. The rubber partitions wore out quickly and needed to be replaced after only 10-15 shots. But for a secret operation where only one accurate and silent shot was needed, this was more than enough. The Welrod was a weapon for close-range combat. Its effective range did not exceed 20 to 25 meters, but it was not intended for open combat. Its element was dark alleys, quiet offices, and sudden encounters with guards. The pistol was designed for 7.65 and 9mm caliber cartridges, which had a subsonic bullet velocity. This eliminated the loud bang that occurs when the sound barrier is broken. Every element of the design was subordinated to one goal: maximum silence. Reloading was done manually by turning and moving the rear part of the slide. This made the pistol slow, but it completely eliminated the clatter of the automatic mechanism. An agent could fire a shot and, without making any unnecessary noise, prepare the weapon for the next one. The Welrod was actively used by British, American, and French resistance agents throughout occupied Europe. It was the perfect tool for silent assassinations and sabotage. Its simple and inconspicuous appearance made it easy to conceal. After World War II, the history of this pistol did not end. It continued to be used by the special services of various countries for several more decades. The Welrod became a true legend in the world of covert operations. This weapon is a striking example of how a highly specialized task can give rise to unique and ingenious engineering solutions. Are you ready to find out how the British went even further and tried to create a weapon not from steel, but from ordinary ice? This exceeded all my expectations. At the height of the Battle of the Atlantic, the British Navy desperately needed aircraft carriers to fight German submarines, but steel was in short supply. Then scientist Geoffrey Pake came up with an idea that at first seemed crazy to everyone: to build an aircraft carrier out of ice. The idea was not as simple as it seems. It was not about ordinary ice, but about a new composite material called pykit. It consisted of approximately 14% wood shavings and 86% water. When frozen, this mixture acquired incredible strength, comparable to concrete. The project was codenamed Habakkuk. The plan was to create a giant ship over 600 meters long with a displacement of 2 million tons. It was to be the largest ship ever built by man. The pykret hull would have been virtually invulnerable to torpedoes. An explosion could have left only a small crater, which could easily have been healed by simply filling it with water. Such a ship would have been unsinkable in the truest sense of the word. To prevent melting, the giant hull would have been penetrated by a complex system of refrigeration units. In essence, it would have been a huge floating refrigerator. Its deck could accommodate up to 200 aircraft. To test the concept, an 18-meter-long prototype was built in Canada. It successfully stayed afloat all summer, proving the viability of the idea. Winston Churchill was enthusiastic about the project and ordered full-scale construction to begin. However, shortcomings soon became apparent. The enormous weight of the ice made the ship very slow and unwieldy, and the complex cooling system required a huge amount of resources, which were in short supply, no less than steel. In addition, the situation at the front was changing. The Battle of the Atlantic was almost won, new air bases appeared, and the urgent need for such a giant aircraft carrier disappeared. The project was becoming too expensive and complex. In the end, Habakkuk was abandoned. The ice giant was never built. The prototype was left to melt in a Canadian lake, which took 3 whole years. The Habakkuk project went down in history as one of the most ambitious and surreal military projects ever. It shows that in desperate times, even the most fantastic ideas can be taken seriously. It is a monument to the boundlessness of human imagination. What if I showed you a weapon that defies the laws of physics? The idea of firing without exposing oneself to return fire has preoccupied the military since the advent of firearms. During World War II, German engineers attempted to solve this problem head-on by creating one of the strangest devices ever seen, the Krumlauf attachment. It was a special curved device that was attached to the barrel of a standard STG-44 assault rifle. It allowed the user to literally shoot from around a corner. There were versions with bends of 30, 45, 60, and even 90 degrees. The main purpose of the attachment was to shoot from trenches, shelters, and from inside armored vehicles. The tank crew could fire at enemy infantry that had come too close without leaving the vehicle. This solved the problem of dead zones around the armored vehicle. A complex system of mirrors, similar to a periscope, was used for aiming. It allowed the gunner to see where he was aiming while remaining completely safe behind a wall or armor. On paper, everything looked perfect. However, in practice, Krumlov proved to be extremely impractical and unreliable. The curved barrel created enormous stress, and bullets often fragmented, flying out in a cloud of shrapnel. The accuracy of the weapon was appalling. The service life of the attachment itself was negligible. The 30-degree bend version lasted for about 300 shots, and the 45-degree version for only 160. After that, the attachment became unusable and had to be replaced. In addition, cleaning such a curved barrel was a real pain for soldiers. The design was complex to manufacture and very expensive. It was impossible to equip the Army with such a device on a large scale. Despite all its shortcomings, several thousand of these attachments were produced. They were used mainly on the Eastern Front, especially during urban combat, where the ability to shoot from around corners gave at least some advantage. The Krumlov did not revolutionize warfare. It was more of a desperate attempt to solve a tactical problem through complex mechanics. It was a technological dead end. Nevertheless, the idea of shooting around corners did not die. Today, similar but much more sophisticated systems are used by special forces around the world, and the Krumlov has gone down in history as one of the most recognizable and bizarre symbols of German weapons design. In the next chapter, we will learn how the Allies responded to such challenges with their own equally original inventions. The Battle of the Atlantic was largely a war of technology. German submarines were becoming increasingly sophisticated, and standard depth charges were no longer effective enough. The British Navy needed a new anti-submarine weapon capable of striking before the submarine could dive. This weapon was the Hedgehog bomb launcher. The name was very accurate. The device consisted of a package of 24 rods that fired simultaneously, covering the water in front of the ship with grenades. The main difference between the Hedgehog and depth charges was in how they worked. Depth charges exploded at a predetermined depth, creating a powerful shockwave. To hit the target, it was necessary to know the exact position of the boat. Hedgehog shells, on the other hand, were contact fuses. They exploded only when they hit the submarine's hull directly. This required less accuracy in determining the depth, but more in determining the location. The absence of explosions when a miss occurred was a huge psychological and tactical advantage. If there were no explosions after a Hedgehog salvo, it meant a miss, and the sonar operator could continue to track the target without being drowned out by the roar of his own bombs. For the submarine crew, a Hedgehog attack was a real nightmare. Dozens of small shells entered the water around the boat with an ominous rustle. The moment of waiting, will it hit or not, was incredibly tense. One or more explosions meant almost certain destruction for the submarine. Even a single 16-kilogram charge could pierce the boat's sturdy hull, causing it to sink. This was much more effective than the simple concussion from a distant depth charge explosion. The device was relatively simple and could be installed on ships of various classes, from destroyers to small corvettes. This made it possible to equip the Allied anti-submarine forces en masse with a new and effective weapon. Are you ready for the shocking truth? In 1940, awaiting the German invasion, Britain desperately needed a simple anti-tank weapon for its militia. Thus was born the No. 74 grenade, better known as the sticky bomb, one of the strangest and most controversial inventions of the war. The idea was to create a grenade that would stick to the armor of a tank rather than bounce off it. This would ensure that all the energy of the explosion was directed at the target. The concept was logical, but its implementation turned into a real engineering nightmare. The main element was a glass sphere filled with nitroglycerin. The outside of the sphere was coated with a powerful adhesive and protected by a special tin casing. Before throwing it, the soldier had to tear off the casing, exposing the adhesive surface. On paper, everything looked fine, but in practice, the weapon proved to be extremely temperamental. The adhesive worked perfectly on clean and dry surfaces, but was almost useless if the tank's armor was covered with dirt or moisture. And in combat conditions, it almost always was. The bomb was dangerous not only to the enemy, but also to the soldier himself. The adhesive was so strong that the grenade could easily stick to his own uniform. The instructions advised not to throw it, but to run up to the tank and attach it by hand, which was tantamount to suicide. Despite all its shortcomings, about 2.5 million sticky bombs were produced. Prime Minister Winston Churchill personally insisted on their production, believing that even such an imperfect weapon was better than none at all. It was a weapon of desperation. The sticky bomb did not become a miracle weapon, but it fulfilled its main task. It gave the militia fighters at least some means of fighting tanks. The very fact that such a weapon existed boosted morale.
Gentlemen, imagine thousands of these bats released over Tokyo.
The American military was looking for a way to inflict massive damage on Japanese cities, which consisted mainly of wooden buildings. Dental surgeon Little Adams came up with an idea that sounded like something out of a horror movie, using millions of bats to deliver incendiary bombs. The project, codenamed X-Ray, was based on the unique characteristics of these creatures. They could carry loads exceeding their own weight, fly in the dark, and find secluded places to rest, such as attics and spaces under the roofs of houses. The plan was as follows. A miniature incendiary bomb with a timer was attached to each individual. Thousands of these bombers were placed in a special carrier container. The container was dropped from an airplane at high altitude. During the fall, the container was supposed to open, releasing the squadron. The animals would scatter throughout the city in search of shelter, and after a set time, the timers would go off, causing thousands of simultaneous fires in the most inaccessible places. Thousands of bats were captured for testing, and tiny incendiary devices weighing only 17 grams were developed. The project was considered so promising that it received the approval of President Roosevelt. Several tests were conducted, which confirmed the fundamental feasibility of the idea. However, the project encountered many difficulties. It was practically impossible to control living creatures. During one of the tests, the armed individuals accidentally escaped and burned down a hangar and the general's car at the test site. In addition, the project's development was too slow. By the time the system was almost ready, work on the atomic bomb was already in full swing. The Manhattan Project promised much faster and more decisive results. During the war, engineering obstacles began to play an increasingly important role. Minefields, wire fences, and concrete blocks. Special means were required to overcome them. German engineers proposed their solution, the Goliath self-propelled tracked mine. It was a small track chassis about the size of a desk. Inside the hull was an explosive charge weighing between 60 and 100 kilograms. Goliath had no crew and was controlled remotely. It was controlled by an operator using a special remote control. 3 wires connected the remote control to the tourniquet, 2 for controlling left and right movement, and 1 for detonation. The cable was over 600 meters long. The main task of the Goliath was to blow up fortifications, bridges, and other engineering structures. The operator, from a safe location, could guide the self-propelled mine directly to the target and activate the detonator at the right moment. This allowed them to avoid casualties among the sappers. Goliaths were also used to destroy tanks and to clear passages through minefields. A powerful explosion could destroy or seriously damage any armored vehicle of that time. They became one of the first examples of mass-produced remote-controlled weapons. However, this system had serious drawbacks. Wired control was its Achilles heel. The wire could easily be cut by shrapnel or simply break when moving over rough terrain. Its low speed, about 10 kilometers per hour, made the Goliath an easy target for any anti-tank weapon. Its thin armor only protected it from small arms fire. In addition, the cost of one such vehicle was quite high. Despite this, more than 7,000 Goliaths were produced. They were used on all fronts, from the Kursk Bulge to the beaches of Normandy. Their use did not have a decisive impact on the course of the war, but it did cause the Allies a lot of trouble. The Goliath became the forerunner of modern combat robots and unmanned systems. It demonstrated both the potential and the problems of remotely controlled weapons. It was an important, albeit not entirely successful step in the development of military technology.
Der Beton bindet gut ab, Herr Ingenieur.
By the middle of the war, German engineers had achieved great success in the construction of bunkers and fortified structures. Huge concrete pillboxes and submarine shelters were virtually invulnerable to conventional aerial bombs. The Allies needed weapons capable of penetrating meters-thick layers of reinforced concrete. The answer to this challenge was a British development, unofficially named the Disney bomb. It got its name from a short propaganda cartoon made by Walt Disney Studios that showed how it worked. It was a real engineering marvel. Outwardly, the bomb looked like a conventional large-caliber munition, but its secret was inside. A solid-fuel rocket booster was located in the tail section. This booster gave the bomb tremendous speed in the final phase of flight. The principle of operation was as follows. The bomb was dropped from a bomber at a high altitude. In free fall, it gained considerable speed. At an altitude of about 1.5 kilometers, the rocket engine automatically activated. The rocket booster accelerated the bomb to supersonic speed, about 750 meters per second. At the moment of collision with the target, it possessed enormous kinetic energy. This allowed it to penetrate up to 5 meters of reinforced concrete. The bomb's casing was made of high-strength steel so that it would not be destroyed upon impact with concrete. The fuse was inertial, with a delay so that the explosion would occur inside the bunker, causing maximum damage. Using these bombs was no easy task. They had to be dropped with great precision. B-17 bombers were specially modified to carry and accurately drop this heavy and long ammunition. We have looked at just a few examples from the vast arsenal of strange and unusual weapons of World War II. Behind each of these projects, from the unguided wheel to the ice aircraft carrier, lies a story of human thought pushed to its limits in extreme conditions. These inventions show war from an unexpected angle. They demonstrate that war is not only about strategy and tactics, but also a desperate search for technological breakthroughs that can provide a decisive advantage. Sometimes this search led to the creation of ingenious designs that were ahead of their time. And sometimes it led to the birth of completely useless and absurd constructions. Most of these projects never became weapons of mass destruction and did not have a serious impact on the course of hostilities. They were too complex, expensive, or unreliable. But they were an important part of the overall technological race. Many of the ideas behind these strange devices did not die. The principles of remote control, silent weapons, composite materials, and rocket acceleration were developed in the post-war years. The experiments of that time became the foundation for many modern military technologies. We conclude our journey into the world of forgotten military technologies. These strange and amazing inventions are not just curiosities of history. They are evidence of the boundless human ingenuity capable of producing both brilliant solutions and spectacular failures. They remind us that war is not only the roar of guns, but also the quiet, intense work of minds in secret laboratories and design bureaus. The history of these projects teaches us that in the search for advantage, there are no taboo topics or ideas that are too bold. What other little-known pages of military history would you like to explore with us? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.